Right, good afternoon, and thank you for joining today's webinar, The New Working World. My name is Holly, and I'm part of the professional development team here at IIRSM. Our speakers today are Gareth Evans and Laura Aucott. In this webinar, Gareth and Laura will explore issues pertinent to today's workplace, from how tools can be utilised by safety professionals to produce data-led decisions, to the impact of flexible and adaptive working practices on staff engagement. Gareth and Laura, thank you for joining us both today.
Yep, thank you.
Before I hand over...
Yeah, thank you very much.
Before I hand over, there are just a couple of things I need to run through with you. First of all, you'll be on mute for the duration of the webinar. However, you can type your questions using the chat function, which is on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and we will answer these during the Q&A sections of the webinar, and there'll be a couple of opportunities for you to ask your questions to Gareth and Laura. Secondly, the webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with individuals who are unable to attend the live event, and we'll also add it to IIRSM's YouTube channel as well, so you can recap on anything later on as well. Okay, that's enough from me. Gareth is starting us off today, so Gareth, over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Holly. So yeah, I'm going to do a quick introduction for myself and the company I work for. So my name is Gareth Evans. I work for a brand new company called Yondr, and our mission is to help clients meet their data center capacity and technical real estate needs faster, more elegantly, and with better performance and outcomes than anyone else. To do this, we provide end-to-end solutions across the property life cycle, funding, designing, delivering, and operating hyperscale data centers with dedication to constant innovation and enriching end-user experience. So what I'd like to talk about today is data and data collection. So what is data? By definition, data is facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. By nature of what we do as health and safety professionals, we are curious problem solvers. It is usually down to us as department leads, managers, advisors, or coordinators, or whatever title we have, to report up and downstream what went wrong, why it's happened, and what we'll do again to prevent it from happening. So this is a relatively new journey for invest in equipment, technology, and resource, which in turn transformed their business, and for me personally, how I approach health and safety. By going through those digital transformations, I saw similarities and common methodologies and looked at how we apply those to our profession. So traditionally, how do we collect health and safety related data? How do we link this together? How does this inform how we operate our business, be it by organization, by project, or by task? How long does this take? Is it instant? Now, the smaller the organization, the easier this is to do, and the larger the organization, the more moving parts and intricacies involved. So this process is a common journey and familiar task that most of us at some point in our careers carried out. We may still be doing it. And the question for me is, so what? What do we gain? Is the information current? Is it now? Or is it too late? Now, to look at different types of data and think again about that definition. Facts and statistics collected together for reference or analysis. Now, traditionally, how many times have we taken handwritten notes and pumped them into a spreadsheet, or taken verbal commands and transposed them into statistical facts? How long does this take? And another factor involved in that is, by nature as humans, we are designed to fail. Nobody gets it right all of the time, every time. There may be unreadable handwriting or miscommunication, or when we're inputting that information into a spreadsheet, we hit the number 1 instead of the number 2. What does that mean? What does that mean to the overall result? So looking at modern documentation, some of the tools that some of you might be using today, or down to collaborative spreadsheets. Microsoft have Excel Online now, G Suite, which is Google's version, or Smartsheets. Some companies may use health and safety software, which has apps on the back of it, mobile applications. We got audio features with artificial intelligence, which can pick up keyword analysis, video, which can detect if people are wearing 5-point PPE, IoT, which is the Internet of Things. So that's connected data, connected machinery, all into a database, all readily available for analysis in real time. So I want to talk about this chart, which I got shown about 18 months ago by a company called Gartner, who are a research and advisory company. Now, when I first saw this, it got me thinking, how do we apply this to my area of business? Where do we think we currently sit? Where do we want to be? And what value will that bring? So how digitally mature would we rate our business? Can we define what we do? Can we describe what will happen after an event? Can we predict the next event? And can we prescribe the outcome to change the course of that event, or even prevent that from happening altogether? So looking at those 4 points, the descriptive, the diagnostic, the predictive, and the prescriptive. So I'm going to talk about how this would be to an overall business first, and then relay that into health and safety. So as descriptive analytics, what happened? We're all very good at telling our customers, suppliers, and clients what we do. To translate that into health and safety, we got our risk assessments, method statements, and standard operating procedures. So diagnostic analytics. Why do we do what we do? Again, into health and safety, we got event investigations. There are many processes, procedures, software even, that allow us to carry out thorough investigation and establish root cause of any significant event. On to predictive. What will happen? Now, as a company, how do we forecast, be it budget, sales, staff retention? You know, we have a rough idea of what, and this is something that's been going on for many years. Now, in health and safety, this is the part that got me thinking. How can we predict what will happen? When will it happen before it happens? So this journey that followed took us down a route of looking at all the data we capture, then in steps. How do we record it? As stated previously, in small companies, this is very easy if the process is little, but how does this scale? So transferring handwritten templates and documentation, or verbal to digital, looking at the points in those processes which we believe would have an influential factor, either a root cause investigation or a point of interest in everything. So risk assessments, method statements, audits, permits, inductions, plant service schedules, the lot. Suddenly our list of data points becomes more rich and full. Instead of logging just accidents and near misses against our person hours to give us the golden AIR or AFR, we begin to record everything around it. So then we look at the software to apply algorithms and ask the question, the last significant event we had, what is the likelihood of that happening again, and when will it happen? Scan all the information we capture live and answer that question for me. So a question which was thrown at me when I first started talking about this, what does this mean for your job? Are you safe? And for me, yes, now we are. But the next point, I'm going to say a little bit why. So we look at prescriptive. How does our business decide what it will do next? Again, there are lots of tools, data, and even consultants out there who will advise our C-level board or our managing directors or owners. Why? In health and safety terms, how can we prevent what is going to happen now before it happens? So we look at the last 3 points previously, that descriptive, diagnostic, and predictive. And where in that do we need human interaction? Apart from setting aside asking those question sets, once it's set up, we don't. But for me, that human element is our experience. And I'm fortunate enough to call on some colleagues and people I've worked for in the past and expertise and ask that question. That suddenly, with all the information through the rest of our project or the rest of our property or whatever else we got going on at the moment, there is a percentage likelihood of it happening again by 50%. Now, if I was to do something, be that re-educate, change procedure, be it whatever, but stop that event happening, how would I do it? And how would I do it now? So before I move on, there's that diagonal to the right line, which is hindsight, insight, foresight. Not looking at hindsight, but definitely insight and foresight next. So this is the Oxford Dictionary definition, it's the capacity to gain an accurate, deep understanding of something, someone or something. Now, for me, this is us looking at our business with a microscope, analyzing how we perform in granular detail, describing what we do, and diagnosing why we do it, or in the event of an incident, why did it happen? That could be things like our audits, inspections, our induction details, our permits, and event observations, plant service registers, and I'm sure as a company, you'll have a list of other metrics which you'll record as well. So how do we enrich our data further? So we have dissected our business through Insight. Now let's look at the wider picture. If Insight is looking at your business through a microscope, then Foresight is taking a telescope and looking at the stars in the wider universe and everything else around us, which will have a positive or negative effect on the outcome. So take, for instance, that accident that's about to occur. Does the fact that we have a freak heat wave in March, or it's taken an extra 2 hours to travel to and from site, does this have a factor, or does this have an effect on the accidents about to happen? So they are widely available public information. So that's the weather, travel, office and national statistics, even political status, social media even. And you might think, does this have a minor or major effect? As a working example of this, in 2013, the World Health Organization tracked the spread of Ebola through Twitter. Now, brand tools and how do we go about this? So Pepsi or Coca-Cola. So for me, it's agnostic by choice, but following a common methodology. Now, going through this 2 or 3 times, I've seen people go down brand A or brand B, but following the same methodology gives you the same picture. It's a choice. Digitally, there are lots of companies out there that can blend data from different sources and create beautiful visuals. Now, some of the software providers out there, you got the likes of Amazon, AWS, Microsoft with Azure or Power BI. You got Google with Google Cloud or Data Studios, and TensorFlow, which is their artificial intelligence arm, Tableau for beautiful visualizations, and then you got Alteryx, which is a powerful data science tool. You may have bespoke off-the-shelf platforms that is an all-in-one. If that works for you, then great. But please, if you want to analyze and blend additional data, please ensure you have open APIs or the ability to export that data where it can properly analyzed, so you can properly future-proof your business and your company within that. So for me, what do I want to see when I'm looking at collecting all this data? I honestly despise Excel charts, graphs, and reports with a passion. There's nothing less inspiring for me in a meeting than going through slide after slide, a spreadsheet with a couple of pie charts thrown in for good measure. So what do I want to see? For me, it needs to be appealing, informative, sparks conversation, debate, and is engaging. So my take on this is that we're evolving in technology at a speed far greater than ever experienced in our existence. We have the ability to enhance how we behave and improve how we work through accurate data-led decision-making with a goal of protecting the people and the environment we work around. There are lots of options available to us, and I please would implore you to explore. If you are ready, then great. And thank you very much.
Gareth, I had a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, lovely. One of the things that I always come up against when we're looking at innovation in risk and safety, we talk to a lot of major corporations and then a lot of SMEs as well. And the SMEs are always really conscious around the cost factor of these sorts of things. They don't have the budgets of the bigger companies like perhaps Yondr does. So what is the cost implication of doing this sort of data-led analytics?
So what I've noticed is you got some off-the-shelf platforms like I'm sure people see around the SHE Expo and stuff like that. But then you look at the big players like Amazon or Google or Microsoft, all their cloud services and the analytical side of it is by scale. So if you're using information, they charge you for how much information you use. So as a small organization, you're not going to need the bandwidth as a large multinational organization, and that is billed by usage.
Okay.
So it's quite scalable in that sense.
Okay, so it is something that can be implemented quite easy from an SME perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm sure like Azure and Cloud Platform and AWS, they all offer X amount of gigabytes free to begin with to kick you off in that right direction, and just generally support's pretty good as well. So speaking to them, they're quite happy to get you on that journey with them.
Okay, and obviously you talked a lot about the predictive analytics side of things, which is something I find absolutely fascinating. But what's the accuracy like of those predictive analytics? Have you been able to get some numbers or see some sort of achievements?
Yeah, it's growing and it gets better every time. So the algorithms we apply over the top of it are machine learning. So the more information we pump into it, the more it learns. So like everything, these are accurate predictions, not accurate, but it's the degree of accuracy. But I'd rather take a 60 or 70% chance of something happening over an educated guess. So it's like everything the more we use it, the smarter it gets.
Right. Okay. That was really, really interesting. Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you, Gareth. If anyone else has got any questions, you can type those in the chat function. Laura will be up speaking next, and we'll have some more Q&A at the end of the presentations as well. So just type your questions away, and we'll pick those up at the end of Laura's presentation.
Yes, so hi. So as Holly mentioned, my name is Laura Aucott. For those that don't know me, I work for HSE Recruitment. So as the name probably suggests, we are a health and safety and environmental recruitment agency. I've been doing this for, 9 years now, so quite a while. So what I wanted to do was just give you kind of a whistle-stop tour through some of the things we're seeing from a people and culture perspective. So what is happening in terms of the workplace, what are people expecting that's perhaps a little bit different, and how do we stay ahead of the game to make sure that, not only are you attracting the right people, but you're holding on to them once you get them. So I wanted to start off with this quote that I found that I thought was really, really interesting. So the most important asset at your company isn't something you can put your hands on. It isn't equipment or the physical plant. It isn't data, sorry, Gareth, technology or intellectual property. The most valuable part of your company is the people, the human capital, and any plans to move your business forward have to start there. So this quote came from a survey that was done by the Harvard Business School. It was a global survey of professionals, and it was looking at what they thought the major risks and the issues were facing their current companies. So the idea of not having the correct support, not having the right people internally, was a huge risk that came out of this study. Only 32% of the leaders that took part said that they were confident they had the right talent, they had the right people skills to get where they wanted to get to with their company's strategic goals, which I think is quite a shockingly low number. And I wasn't, although it's a shockingly low number, I wasn't that surprised, because it does kind of back up what I found anecdotally in the last 9 years of recruitment, is that most companies don't tend to have enough resources. They don't have the resources they need, and when they do get those resources, they're not able to hold on to them because they don't tend to upskill, they don't tend to keep them interested, and that's usually because they're working in quite an old school mentality, and that's not the way that people want to be looked at anymore. It's not the way that people want to work anymore. So there's been a huge shift in terms of the new generation employees. So, you'll hear people talk about millennials and Generation Z. Although a lot of it is a sweeping generalization, there are definitely some significant differences in what those guys are looking for when they're looking for work. And if we don't sort of adapt to that, we're at major risk of losing those people and losing the skills that we need to hit our strategic goals. I think a lot of people sort of see millennials and Generation Z as quite a scary group of people because they don't understand them. They potentially think that maybe that they don't have the same work ethic or they don't have the same ambition, but it's not necessarily that. It's just that their ethic and their ambition is very different to what we're used to. And if we don't embrace that, it means, we're not retaining the new stuff that we need from this demographic. We have to rely on the stuff we already have, which, is fine for the time being, but eventually you're going to have a really dramatic gap where you've got staff retiring and then not enough people coming through or being upskilled to fill that gap in. So I just thought I'd give you a brief overview of some of the things that have come out of my experience that seem quite important to these new generations that we need to look at to make sure we're retaining, the good people that we want. So number one on this list was a huge thing that came out when I was speaking to people, and it's the ethical side of things. So this doesn't just mean people's personal ethics, but also the company's ethics, and also tied into that is kind of their ambition and their progression, all that sort of stuff. These are all the things that are driving people. And what we're finding more and more is that these new generations are really, really concerned about their companies being very ethical from a people and a cultural perspective. So that's not just looking after their staff internally, but also looking at how their company impacts on the wider world. This massively pulls in lots of stuff from the environmental side of things. They really want to believe that they and their company are having a good impact on the world, that, the company's beliefs, they correlate with their own personal ethics. So with this in mind, we're finding that more and more companies are really focusing on the environmental side if they want to retain these people and bring these people on. Either setting environmental up as a completely separate area or bringing it into the safety and the risk domain. So what's really, really important for companies at the moment, we're finding, is that you either have really good policies in place from an environmental perspective, or that you're willing to kind of upskill what you've currently got, what your staff and your policies, and sort of bridge that gap. And the good thing there is, with the advent of the new ISO 45001 system, the systems have never been more aligned. There's never an easier time to bridge that gap and make sure that it's coming in. We're also kind of finding that, particularly in the safety and the risk world, people aren't just seeing this as sort of just a job anymore. It's much more of a vocation. I think when I first started out and further back than then, we had a lot of people who came into safety as a second career. They started off maybe operationally and then kind of fell into safety and then trained from there. But now, because of this sort of increase in ethical concern around millennials and Gen Z, we're finding a lot of people are choosing safety and risk as their first career. They're genuinely really passionate about the industry. They really want to progress the industry, and they really want to support companies as best that they can. So they are dedicated, they are ambitious, but they expect something different, I think. They expect very, very clear and very precise succession planning when they join a company. So what we're finding at the moment is most advisors that come into industry, they only tend to spend about 2 years in their first role before they move on, which is quite different from previously. And the biggest feedback we get from them is because they don't have that succession planning. They don't have that progression. There's nowhere for them to go in that role. This new generation of workers, they need really, really clear structure. So using my own example, because unfortunately I am a millennial, I believe, just about, when I joined my company, I was very much of the same mindset. I needed a very, very clear progression path. I needed to know what every single promotion was and how I could get to my end goal. And that doesn't mean that, you need to boot people out of roles so that others can step into them. But what you do need to do is make sure you're spending a lot of time with your staff, understanding their motivations and making sure that you're offering them the support that they need. And if you aren't able to offer a step up, because there's someone in that post or there's budgetary concerns, you need to be able to support their development in other ways. So whether that's additional training or additional responsibilities, or like we mentioned with the environmental, pulling in something else that they're really, really passionate about, as well as supporting them through their CPD. So, the biggest thing we're finding for people moving on at the moment is because they feel they've stagnated in their current role, and it's just happening much quicker than previously. Previously, you would have said maybe after 7 or 8 years, people start to feel like that. Now, we're seeing 2 or 3. The next couple of points on there was around sort of flexible and adaptive working. So flexible, agile, and adaptive working, there are lots of different words for really, really similar concepts. So I'm assuming that everyone here understands flexible working, but obviously that is a massive issue for people at the moment, and companies that aren't able to offer that, we're finding, are losing out on people before they even get to interview. They're not even interested in having that conversation with companies. We kind of see it at the moment as very much a matter of respect. This is how these guys think of it. They want people to respect that they know what they're doing, that they will get done what needs to be done, and they will do it in the hours that work for them. The idea is that if you've got these employees that are working, late into the evening, and they're putting all those extra hours in to get the work done, and then the next morning they're 2 minutes late and they're getting those disciplinaries and things like that for coming in late, that's the easiest way to be losing staff at the moment. And the thing is as well, the world has never really been more connected at the minute. So the assumption is that you don't have to be in the office anymore to get the work done. Everyone tends to have emails and access on their phones, on their tablets. Most people I know do give up extra time in the evenings or during their commute to check things out or deal with extra issues. The working day is much more fluid than previously, and the 9 to 5. And then agile and adaptive working are very similar. They take into consideration the working hours and the location, but what they do is they actually take into consideration as well the actual job role. So the idea that now people want job roles that are a little bit more fluid. They're not stuck doing a definitive same thing day in, day out. They want to be less constrained. They want to be able to use their creativity and make sure that their skills are being used to the best advantage. So another great example of that is actually, again, sorry myself, but when I was looking for sort of promotion, and the stuff that I really enjoyed was the social media, the branding, the marketing, rather than being told that that's not your job, don't do that. What our company did is they embraced that. They gave me the ability to have this agile working, to make my role a bit more fluid, and then create a new position off the back of it, rather than having an employee like myself move on because we didn't have the job for them. So that's a really, really important thing at the moment. And then I'm conscious I've been talking for a while, so I'll do these last few quite quickly. But EDI, for those who don't know, that's equality, diversity, and inclusion. A huge, huge impact on companies at the moment. One that I've written quite a lot about, that I've spoken quite a lot about. And what we're starting to realise here is how big EDI has, not just culturally and ethically, but even on the bottom line for a company. Strong EDI policies are really, really imperative from a commercial perspective. And the reason being is, if you think, look, you've got a board of directors and it's full of white 50-year-old men that all have the same education and the same experience. They generally are usually all coming up with the same ideas. So again, it's about limiting creativity. And this new generation, they expect to see more diversity. They expect to see people from all different walks of life and different backgrounds. Particularly, in certain sectors, if you looked at, say, media or events, and you're targeting a particular event towards, say, for example, Latin America or something like that, if you don't have a clear understanding of the culture and the practices of Latin America because you have no internal representation of that company, then you're already at a huge disadvantage. So that's a massive commercial and ethical standpoint at the moment that the companies really, really need to think about. I think a lot of companies seem to think that just having an EDI policy is enough, but it's really, really not anymore. Saying that you don't discriminate, unfortunately, doesn't eliminate things like unconscious bias, or it doesn't give equal opportunity in terms of applications. So, if you want to get a more diverse workforce, but you only ever advertise your roles in The Guardian, then you will only ever get the same people that apply for those roles. So it's much more than just having an EDI policy internally. Company culture is massively tied into basically all four of those things above. This is ethics, this is EDI, this is the ability to be respected and be able to work on their own terms. That's a huge thing at the moment. And then the economic side of things, when you look at reward and recognition, this is massive. The biggest advice we can sort of give from that perspective is just make sure you're keeping up to date with things like as simple as salary surveys. So often we have companies come to us and they want to replace an advisor or a manager, and they're so shocked when we tell them that we cannot replicate that person for the salary that they've been paying that person. and they say, well, that's what we've paid him for the last 10, 15 years, and that's exactly the problem. You have to make sure you're keeping up from a reward and recognition point of view. So yeah, things as simple as salary surveys, or even just talking to people like ourselves who know what kind of market worth is at the moment. That's probably one of the other biggest reasons that people move on, other than that career progression, is that they're being undervalued, and they know they're being undervalued. So that was a massively quick run through of some of the issues that are facing companies in terms of the people perspective at the minute. And to be honest, it's something I could probably talk about for days. But what I have done, I've included some just a few quick resources here that people can have a look at. I have got absolutely hundreds more. If anyone wants some more, then you can just get in touch and I can give you a bit more information. But I know that our June seminar will be going into a lot more detail about this issue, looking at not only people, looking at culture, leadership, and all that sort of stuff as well, which I think Holly is probably going to tell you a bit more about in a bit. But yeah. Thank you very much, and if anyone has any questions, please feel free to either ask them here or just get in touch with me.
Thank you for that, Laura. Yes, I'll explain a little bit more about the seminar at the end. We did have a couple of questions come through for Gareth in the meantime, and if anyone does have any other questions for either Gareth or Laura or both of them, then do type those in the chat function, or as Laura mentioned, you can get in contact after the webinar as well. So the first question for Gareth was from Reese, who asked, what type of blockers or external threats have you experienced to digitalising data streams, and what methods have been used to get around them, particularly the culture of how we've always done things around here?
So I think that depends who we speak to when we do that. So again, culturally, like Laura said, if somebody's not used to change, or look at the generation, some of the Generation X or Z, they're all up for it, and they get quite excited by this new technology, where somebody who maybe has not experienced this before is a bit reluctant to. So it is challenging, and I think the only way to kind of convince people is by showing them the examples and showing them that, well, for me, that this project or this company will become inherently safer. And if we can visualize that and keep those visuals quite engaging, and they can actually see the statistics and the information that works for them, generally that buy-in's been okay. So what we tend to do is we'll have that one sort of golden set of data, that single source of truth, and then we'll maybe give a couple of different visuals, so that sort of there'd be an overarching senior management view who are interested in certain factors, and then it'll be the operational side of it, where some of the people who are going to use this day in, day out, they want to see particular things which are going to help them improve by being quite flexible. And rather than saying that this is what we've always done, is think of the art of the possible. It's pretty limitless of how we lots of ways of doing it. It does get a bit sticky on times, but it's persistency. And I think as health and safety professions, a big sort of key or big tool in our arsenal outside of sort of digital stuff is definitely communication, and the ability to communicate quite clearly and cohesively, and that sort of persuasive method within that. So yeah, there's it can be challenging, but when it pulls off, it's definitely rewarding.
All right, thank you, Gareth. And then we've had another couple of other questions from Dwarika, who's asked about threats of document and accident investigation risks. Is that something you look at within your
I'm
data?
Not quite sure I understand in terms of threats. What sort of threats?
Okay, we might need a little bit more information about that one then, Dwarika. Okay. Are there any other questions?
I got one for Laura. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
So
go on, Gareth.
when you're recruiting, particularly people who are looking for staff, are they particularly heavy on the academic side of it, being chartered or to a certain level, or certain level, are they more interested now in the sort of, like I said, the sort of cultural fit? Where does that kind of sit with you?
Yeah. Honestly, the companies that we find probably get the better people are the ones that don't get really, really hung up on the qualification side of it. You know, everyone that we deal with will always have, you know, obviously a base level of qualification, generally sort of a NEBOSH certificate or, you know, level 3, level 4 in something. But what we do try and get our clients to focus on more is that cultural fit. That is just from a longevity perspective. You know, with all these things that are changing, that's what's most important to people. And if you just go on, okay, well, I want a diploma qualified person from manufacturing. I don't care, you know, what their approach is. I don't care what sort of company they want to join. I just care that they've done this before. Yeah, you might get someone through the door, but the likelihood of that person sticking is really low. You know, they're going to move on pretty quickly. The way that we do things is probably a little bit backwards to how a lot of people do things. So I know a lot of sort of high street agencies and things like that. If they've got a role for a client, they'll just phone someone up and say, I've got a job, it's 35k in London, are you interested? And if they are, they put them forward, and that's why you're not getting these long-term matches. What we do is completely flip the script. So you speak to someone and say, look, I know we've spoken a couple of times before, but just remind me, what do you want from a company? What's important to you? You know, is it the ethics? Is it the flexi working? What is it that is drawing you to something? Okay, what sort of challenge do you want? What sort of team do you want to work in? What sort of leadership do you want? All of those things are really the things that make people stay within a company. And if they then match what our client can offer them, then we'll tell them about the job. So yeah, I personally think the companies that get the better quality of people are the ones that will focus more on getting the right culture fit than the right academic fit, because you can always train people from an academic perspective. You know, as long as they've got that base level of knowledge, if it's massively important to you that they have the diploma, you can put them through the diploma, but you can't teach, you know, someone to be your kind of person and to fit with your team and your way of doing things. So yeah, massively culture is much more important, I would say, at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Right, we've had another question in from Babatundi, which I think probably both of you can comment on. So they say, we have reward and recognition program in our organisation for employees, for example, staff recognition award, goal 0 hero. Are there any other recognition programs that you've come across that could be adopted to encourage employees?
There are so many different options out there. I don't always think it has to be as rigid as, you know, a real sort of recognition program. It's more about developing a culture of recognition, a culture where people aren't afraid to not just call people out for doing things wrong, but to congratulate them for doing things right. And again, hugely important from a safety perspective, that people are told when they're doing things the right way. So yeah, there are loads and loads of different reward and recognition programs out there, but again, culture is a big thing for me. I think it's much more important that you develop that culture internally, where someone feels comfortable just going up to a colleague and saying, you know, really, really good job there. You did a brilliant job there, and I really respect it. Or could you tell me how you did that? Because, you know, that was great, and I've never thought to do it that way, or something similar to that. That said, we've got one internally that I do quite like, which is very, very simple, really effective. We've got a system called Breeze, which has a little area for giving kudos to your fellow employees. And all you do is anytime, you see someone doing something good, like we were just discussing, rather than having to go up and say it directly to their face, you can log on to Breathe, you click the little star, you say, I would like to give kudos to, and then you write a little note, and they get an email saying someone's, congratulated you on doing a good job. And little things like that, I think, they just make the day so much nicer when you know that people are recognising what you do day to day. It doesn't have to be huge things or huge policies that you've implemented, but just, turning up and doing a really good job, getting recognised, makes a huge difference. Gareth, I don't know, do you use anything particularly internally, or?
Well, some of our sort of general contractors have, reward recognition programs like green cards on construction sites. So flipping that yellow, red, that very much negative aspect of it. But if people are seeing to be doing positive things, yeah, put that in. And the same thing then, what I ask for them is from our sort of general contractors is that they record the metrics on that. Do we see what we're doing really well? So that maybe we look at some of our processes that might be slightly over-engineered. Can we streamline them? Are we paying too much attention to certain areas? We can see that by tracking that good recognition, because we know we inherently do that well anyway. For me, when I get out on site and when I'm visiting projects, is taking time to talk to people. If you recognize good work, tell people. It's trying to be as transparent as possible. I think like you said, Laura, some things it's not just about the pounds in the bank. It's about being recognized and feeling part of a team, part of being wanted within in an environment, which that kind of works for us anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right, thank you, guys. Reese has asked another question, and he's asked this of you, Laura. So from a young professional perspective, growing up with ethical drivers, what techniques are proving to be successful for improving culture of older generations who may not buy into improving EDI culture? I imagine the organisational culture is a big part of changing perspectives. Is that something you've come across at all?
Yeah, so it's a tough one. I'll be honest, Reese, but it is hard, because you're trying to get people to completely change the way that they've always thought about things. And as Gareth mentioned, people don't necessarily like change. So it is a really, really tricky one to do. The only way really that we've sort of found so far is, although we're kind of approaching things from an ethical perspective, is maybe actually just taking the ethics out of it to start with and show them the commercial benefit, because there is a real definitive cultural benefit, for why they should buy into EDI culture. And if you can prove to them the commercial side of it and that it is going to improve the bottom line, then that's already got them on board. You can then sort of focus on the ethical side of it and whether they genuinely believe it or not afterwards. You kind of got to take the little wins where where you can, I think, from that perspective. But little things like, so we went over to see HS2 a couple of months ago as part of their the Women in Safety program, and we went along and had a chat with them, and they were talking about some pieces of blind recruitment that they'd done. And I have to say, HS2, their guys totally buy into it. They totally get the ethics. But this is a good example of something you could do to demonstrate, why it's a good thing. So, in terms of blind recruitment, what previously people have done is maybe take CVs and take people's names off it, so you can't tell, their ethnicity and things like that. But what HS2 have said is that's not enough, because you can still tell from someone's CV, where they were educated, what kind of environment they were brought up in, all those sorts of things that are real big clues to, their ethnicity, their sexuality, things that can trigger unconscious bias. So what they do for their blind recruitment, and say they're advertising for a safety advisor for one of the particular teams, is they don't ask that people submit CVs, they ask that people answer competency-based questions. That way then the recruitment team goes over the competency-based questions. They can see who genuinely has the competencies to be able to do the role, and only at that point then, once they've sort of been invited to come into interview, do they get the CV. Once people higher up kind of see this thing in action and see that actually the quality of the people that they're getting through is significantly better, or that their EDI numbers are improving, or that even the time taken in the recruitment process has been cut down because you're kind of already doing a first screen, they're going to realise that has an impact from a monetary perspective. And like I said, and then we can work on the ethics from there, but at least they're starting to do stuff. So yeah, it's a really interesting question, Reese, and there's no easy answer, but you've kind of got to appeal to the pocket. If we do this, it'll save you money or it'll make you money, and kind of worry about the ethical side of it afterwards.
Thank you, Laura. As you will have seen on the screen, I've put some information up about the upcoming seminar. we're holding in London, which Laura mentioned earlier, and which will be covering similar themes that we've discussed today. So as well as hearing from Gareth, we'll also be joined by Helen Barge of Risk Evolves, who will be discussing the benefits of being best in class in terms of data protection and cybersecurity, and Graham Jackson, who's Associate Director within the Business Risk Services team at Grant Thornton, and he'll be sharing insights into best practice in terms of people and leadership. So whilst the event is free to attend, places must be booked in advance, and you can do so online. And I'll send the booking link around later on today when I send around some follow-up to this webinar. So there's no more questions I can see. So Laura and Gareth, thank you very much for your time today. It was really, really appreciated.